Hello. Today was going to be a video on the SM. It was going to be an SM Sunday video of working on the engine, basically. That will still come. I realise this is a Sunday. I realise that the SM Sundays have been a bit out of sync recently, but I promise that will come. It may have to wait till next Sunday. This Sunday I decided to make a change to the scheduled programming, if you like, because we had some news during the week. The untimely passing, basically, of a channel member. And I say channel member, I don't want people to go, oh, he's plugging for the channel members and that. It's not that. It's not that. But the fact he was a channel member is a big deal to me. So we lost a guy called Griff. Griff Lane is the name he went by. I assume that's his name and it's not some username or something like that. I don't know. Maybe Griff, like Griff Rhys-Jones. Was he Welsh? I don't know. And that's the stupid thing. I don't know. I never met the bloke. I don't know him. All I know is that every month he donated money to me to do this channel. And he got nothing back for it. And I'm struggling a little bit to process it. So yes, for those who don't, let's give some context here, because this is just going to turn into a complete ramble. A guy called Griff Lane, he was a channel member on this channel. He was a frequenter of Rustival. He was found in the Rustival, the Friendship Corner Facebook group. He was a character in the Mondeo scene, basically. He was a Mondeo fan. He was a fan of Ford Mondeos, and that's why this video is about predominantly Ford Mondeos, because I know nothing about the guy. I didn't know him. And to be honest with you, I don't remember people by their names or by their faces, but I do remember them by their cars, and I remember his car. So let's do a video about Mondeos. I want to do a video about Mondeos because he paid money, as I say, every month, channel member. It's not a lot of money, but it's the symbolicism, the symbolicness of it, because the guy loved his Mondeo. And anyone who watches this channel and has watched it for a little while, firstly, there are other things on your board. Secondly, you will know how much Ford Mondeo content has there been. Other than a little bit of mention of it during one of the Super Tourer videos, which not many people watch, in fact, the only Super Tourer video, I don't really mention Ford Mondeos, so he's got nothing back. He's just literally supporting the channel out of the goodness of his heart. One of the things that's been harder to read recently is I've seen like some posts online from people that were his friends, you know, people that knew him well, mainly in the car world, you know, because that's what brings all these people together. And they were listing this channel up there as one of his favourites, which is really weird to hear, because it was being listed up there with like much bigger, much better channels. And it's, I have a bit of a hard time processing that. So I wanted to do something. You know, it's an untimely passing. He should still be here. He shouldn't not. No, this video shouldn't be being made. He should still be with us, but he's not. I don't know why. I don't know any details. As I say, the bloke could walk past me in the street and I wouldn't know. And yet I'm feeling connected to it in somehow. It's really weird. And so I felt I had to do something. I have no Mondeos to stand in front of. I've got my BX. There's a customer's chassis here. That's got a Ford V6 in it. It's a Cologne. Not as good as a Mondeo V6, but it's got a Ford V6 in it. Hilda, that's a Hillman. Oh, there is a Ford Mondeo V6 in the corner. Sort of bits of one. Yeah, I don't have anything planned. But I had to do something. So I thought, why don't I do a little video about my experiences with Mondeos, and maybe someone else's at the end, because that's all I can do. I'm doing the video in front of the dyno because one of the comments he'd made in a video was, oh, I'd love to get, well, this is a stupid thing. His Mondeo was called Safi, short for Sapphire. I learned this the other day. I thought he was talking about a Sierra Sapphire. It's like, he's got a Mondeo as his profile picture, so it would stand to reason that he might also have a Sierra Sapphire. You know, might be a bit of a Ford fan and have both. No, Safi was the Mondeo. So anyway, he'd made a comment saying, like, you know, it'd be good to get that on the dyno board, and I didn't give it the response that I should have given it. I think I probably just because he's a channel member, I always read them first, and I probably just liked it and responded normally. But in my head, it was ingrained actually that he'd made that comment, because I thought, no, I actually will go back to him. I will go back to him and say, yeah, no, actually, we will get. He had a Mondeo ST220 estate. So I thought, no, that would be a good one to get. But I had the board on the wall at the time, and I wasn't getting up to the 200 horsepower region. It's only recently that I've started going into the 200 horsepower region, because obviously most of what I do is low power. I like doing the low power cars, but I was going to start expanding outwards. And I know that we've got a Ford Focus ST170 lined up. We've had a Z-Tech S recently. I put the S-Max on there. So, you know, an ST220 would have been a fantastic car to put on here. It would have been really good. It would look good on a thumbnail. Would have sounded good. So my plan was to go back to him in the spring, once I'd kind of caught up to the 200 club. So I'm full of regret, because I think he would have liked to see it on the channel. If he does like the channel and he likes the dyno runs and things, I think he would have liked seeing it on there. And I'm regretful that I didn't go back sooner. I feel bad. I feel bad that I didn't get up into the 200 region as quickly as I wanted to, or the fact that I insisted on doing it in a certain order. But yeah, it's just the way. So that was supposed to be the plan. Every month, a little bit of money comes out of his bank account, goes to YouTube, they take their cut out of it. Then it goes to my YouTube account, and he got nothing for it, really. It was just out the goodness of his heart. And so I thought, well, he's never had a Mondeo video. So now I'm going to do a Mondeo video because of him. So yes, let's do some Mondeo talk. So what can I tell you about Mondeos? Bugger all, pretty much. No, a little bit more than bugger all. So I've had two Mondeos. They've both been blue. The Citroen BX that's behind me here, hidden by this chassis, well, I've planned this brilliantly. That's my BX 16 valve. I've had that many years, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't really appear on the channel, but sometimes it does, and all this sort of thing. Now, that car acted as a family car. We had kids, we had twins in 2009, and the only family car we had at the time, we did have a Zara. We had a Zara we could have used, but some idiot swapped it for a Saxo VTS. Oh, it was me. But that engine is now in the other Saxo, the Saxo VTR that my wife has, so she can't complain. So the kids are born. They come early because they're twins, and that does happen. That's quite normal. And we didn't have a family car ready, so the BX had to be pulled into action. So the BX was actually used as a family car for about a month or so, but that was never supposed to be a long-term thing. And we were weighing up kind of what cars to look at. Didn't really know what to go for, and wound up buying a 2000 Ford Mondeo ST200. So it was the 200 version. It's a Mark II Mondeo X-Reg, and these are the pictures of the actual car. We drove to Wales. Took my father-in-law along. That's a mouthful. And he haggled it down. I think about 140,000 miles on it. And yeah, it was a bit of a dog, really. I mean, it wasn't the best. I worked at Ford at the time. I worked at a Ford dealer in the trade sales bit, so in the parts department. So I had access to all the microfiches, the catalogues, everything like that. It made sense to buy a Ford in many ways because it's half discount on the parts, things like that. So we ended up buying this Mondeo, drove it back, well, the roads that go from there to here. And yeah, I mean, not really driven Mondeos much. The first memories of STs and things would be before that, back when I was young. What did I have? I must have had a Honda Prelude. I had an AX GT and a Honda Prelude and a Saxo, and I used to hang around in McDonald's car parks. And there was a guy there who was a bit more mature than all the others. And he had a silver Mondeo ST24. So, no, was it red? I think it might have been burgundy red. There was two Mondeos. There was a Ghia automatic V6, which a guy I know owned, Paul I think it was. and there was a burgundy R-Reg ST24, both hatchbacks. So that's really all I mean, I didn't have much more knowledge of them than that. So I bought this Mondeo, and yeah, we used that as a family car, and it was a good family car. It was good to have something that you looked at and thought, oh no, that might be worth more one day. Like, we've only paid £1,000 for that. That might actually be worth more when we come to sell it, and it was. But it was still quite a cheap car. It was imperial blue, but many different shades. The rear windows had been tinted. It looked pretty cheesy, to be honest, but that was good because we had the babies in the back, so bad tinted windows, blacked out, but that actually worked out well. I remember doing all my research into the ST200s. I did want an ST200 over a 24. The 200, as I remember, had the same 2.5 litre V6 engine as a 24, but it had Ford SVT, pushing my knowledge here, pushing my memory, Ford SVT inlet manifold, throttle body. Camshafts were different. They were hollow, I think, on the ST200. Throttle body, airbox. Basically, yeah, it revved a bit harder, and it was just a slightly leirier version of an ST24. Supposed to have 205 horsepower. It was actually slower than the BX. The BX was quicker than the Mondeo, but then the Mondeo was heavier, and well, as it turns out, it was losing a little bit of power. So we bought that car, that would have been July 2009, and we sold it in November 2010. We basically got to a point where we thought, we can't afford to run this car anymore. And I had put some effort into it, and when we got it, it had this awful tow bar on the back, which had made the back bumper all distorted. What else had I done? I'd done a power steering cooler, got a brand new one from work. Water pump was a common one, because apparently the original water pumps and the genuine Ford water pumps had plastic impellers, and the shaft used to rust, and the plastic impeller would fracture, which is quite a common thing now, and stop turning, and it would cook the engine pretty quickly. Now, whether this was a myth, whether this was one of those like in the inner circle Mondeo people myth things that wasn't actually a big deal, but everyone made it out to be, I don't know. But I went over to the parts store over the road from where I was working and picked up a cheap aftermarket water pump for 18 quid or something like that, and it had a metal impeller. So I changed that, I changed the bearing, and also when I did the water pump, underneath the water pump, or above the water pump, sorry, there's a plastic housing. I think it had Geratech written on it. And under there lived the IMRC unit, the Inlet Manifold Runner Control Unit. And it was quite common for these units to play up, because what that unit basically was an electric brain. It was an ECU kind of thing with a servo motor in it and a cable, and the cable operated the secondary flaps on the inlet manifold. So at low revs it would keep them closed, and then it would slowly open them depending on throttle load, basically maximising torque at low revs and then removing a restriction at high revs. But the problem was, because they mounted it on the top of the engine, it used to cook it. And I remember driving out of Fareham in that car struggled to do 22 to the gallon. I can't remember what the best we ever got once. I think we went on holiday in it once, and we got the aircon working, and we were going up hills with the aircon off, and then turning the aircon on to go down hills, because you could coast, and yeah, it wouldn't affect the aircon. It was that bad. That's how bad it was. And I think we got it up to, we got a picture somewhere of the amazing economy we squeezed out of this car on the motorway, doing about 55, 60 miles an hour. Yeah, it was like 29 or something like that. But I remember coming out of Fareham, and there was a Skoda Octavia diesel in front of me, and he cut me up, and I was being young and stupid and trying to no, I'm not having that. My ego couldn't handle it. So I wanted to get back in front, and I couldn't get past. It wasn't an Octavia VRS diesel or anything. It was just a normal one with black trim on the bumpers and stuff, and I couldn't get past him. And I thought, this is not right. No, 20 odd to the gallon, and I can't get past a Skoda Octavia diesel. But it turns out the inlet manifold runner had played up. The runner control had played up. It wasn't opening the secondaries. It restricts the car. Didn't have the roll and road operating at the time. That's a shame. That would have been good. But I bought a brand new inlet manifold runner control unit from the Ford dealer I worked at, brand new. And then the mod was the cable that went from it to operate the secondaries was just long enough that you could take the manifold runner control unit and flip it over, I think it was, and mount it underneath the battery. It's a much cooler place. So I did that. I modified it and I mounted it under the battery, and it was different. Well, it wasn't a different car after that, but it was a much better car after that. It drove much better at all revs, all throttle loads. It sounded good. It was a good sounding car. It was a nice sounding car. I remember it being, the handling was good. It felt a bit smaller than it was. The seats were comfy. It had full leather. Didn't have blue in it. It kind of had this weird like fake carbon. The gear knob had ST200 on it, I think, and it was like this fake carbon effect. It just felt a bit special, to be honest. It just felt a bit different. A firm ride, but it kind of like the S-Max, firm but not uncomfortable. And my missus cried when we got rid of it. She cried. She loved that car, but it was just too juicy. It was too expensive, and it ended up being replaced with an MG ZS 120 Atomics. So we gone from a Super Touring replica car to the series that followed Super Touring. It wasn't quite as good. Literally, it was an Atomics model, so it was the one based on. It was the one they used as a promo for the Super Touring team, the Atomic Kitten team or something. I don't know. So yeah, we had that Mondeo. And then it was replaced by the MG, and then we had another kid, and the MG was too small before the other kid came along, really, compared to the Mondeo. Mondeo didn't have amazing space in the back. Had a big boot, very big boot, but comparing it to a Xantia or something, which was the other kind of car that size, that era that I knew, Xantia, way more space in the back, like massively so much more comfortable, bigger seats, more legroom. I'm assuming a smaller boot. I'm assuming that the Mondeo they prioritise boot space over backspace. But yeah, the Mondeo, the ST200, that went. Sad to see it go. MG ZS came in. That lasted a similar sort of time. And then we had to get another car because we had another kid, and we ended up with people carriers. Yay! That was a Picasso, which was a better car than both of them, but we didn't like it because it's a Picasso. And in fact, yeah, it was having the Picasso, and then when the kids got big enough to get into booster seats, and they were out of kids seats, that proper car kids seats, that's when we attempted to replace the Picasso with the Mondeo 2, which is actually Mondeo 3, but it was like the second version of the Mondeo that we had, the second coming. Now, we didn't go for an ST220 because they was expensive. And we couldn't justify that. We were running a Picasso diesel, which was doing 45, 50 to the gallon all the time, however you drove it, with very little trouble. You couldn't, dropping to a V6 powered Mark III Mondeo from that, the one like Griff had, the ST220, would have been quite a kick in the nuts. So we didn't do that. No, I did something far worse. I went and got an ST TDCi. Yeah. So this Mondeo, well, I bought it broken. I did the same thing with that MG Atomics. I bought one that was broken. In the case of the MG, because it was a K series, I bought one with a blown head gasket thinking, I'll fix it. And then it's not a problem anymore. In the case of the Mondeo, it was, I'll buy one that's got knackered injectors, and then I'll put new injectors in it or get them overhauled or whatever, and then we'll be tickety-boo. And I got the car cheap. I think I paid 1,800 quid for it in 2013. 2013 we got that. It had 70 or 80,000 miles on it. Performance blue, which isn't Imperial blue, it's similar, but they changed it. I think it had anthracite wheels. I think it had dodgy tints and like a couple of odd colour panels, just like the first one we'd had. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's its spiritual successor. This can't go wrong. And the beauty of it was, we tried it in the back with the kids, and they all fit. The Mark III seemed to have a lot more space in the back than the Mark II. I can't remember where I went to get it. Like Reading or something like that, and it was pretty cheap. It came up, I got it off a guy's driveway, and I can't remember if he was a mechanic, and maybe that should have been the warning sign. I should have gone, oh hang on, mechanic is selling it, he's given up with it. Yeah, I'll buy that. So went to have a look at this Mondeo, ended up buying it. I think I had the trailer at the time, and I think I brought it back on the trailer and put it out in the yard. Brought the kids down, they all fitted, we were delighted, because it was a really nice car to sit in. It was kind of like semi-leather seats, but the centre part of the seats had like a, I don't know what kind of fabric it was. That's useful, isn't it? But the seat felt quite soft. It actually felt quite comfortable. It was a comfortable car, nice gear change, nice driving position, nice layout. Everything was good. It had an original factory climate control system with sat-nav, which was quite rare. apparently. And yeah, it was just a nice car, and I thought this has everything. This has the potential to be lovely. It was a 2.2 TDCi. It was the 170 horsepower, I think they're supposed to be rated at, 6 gears, so it should be good on fuel. It should be quicker than a Picasso, much nicer to drive than a Picasso. It's win-win. So basically, the issue with those engines, as I discovered, is that it's the same engine used in the Transits of the time, the chain-driven twin overhead cam Puma lump. And you could get versions of it that was called a DI in a Transit. Those are fine. You could get versions that were TDDI in a Transit or a Mondeo. They were fine. And then you got the TDCIs. And some of the TDCIs, the low power ones, weren't too bad. But the ones that were affected were the higher power ones. All the ones that had Delphi, I think it was fuel injection system. And the problem with those is that the diesel pumps broke up. I wasn't aware of this until after I paid to get the injectors overhauled. The diesel pumps break up, bits of little fragments of metal go all around the fuel system. They get sent back to the tank, then they get picked up by the pump and pulled through, and they block up everything. And they wreck the injectors, they wreck the lift pump on the tank. It just gets everywhere and damages everything and scores everything, and you're knackered. This thing didn't run properly, and didn't run at all when we got it. And then I had the injectors overhauled, and it started running, but it was running like a dog. And I thought, that's weird. And I bought Ford. It wasn't Forscan. It was some Ford software that could code injectors specifically for that. And yeah, it just basically. And then I went on forums, on the Mondeo forums, and that was the thing. The Mondeo forums were different to, which I'm guessing Griff went on. The Mondeo forums were different to a lot of the other Ford forums, even like the S-Max forum. You go on that, the S-Max groups, you won't get nerdy, techie insight. You get people sticking bonnet vents on a diesel S-Max. You know, the Mondeo ones, it was like there was wikis. There was like making your rear wiper do a sweep when you put it in reverse on a Mark 1. And, you know, making changing the delay of the interior light. All these like quite nerdy things that you're normally accustomed to, like the Citroen world, Peugeot, or the Volvos and Saabs and things like that. You know, it's sort of like these guys who perhaps haven't got as many hobbies and come up with all these things. But the Mondeos were like that. The Mondeos had all this info. So there were lots of good info on there, which I wish I'd found before I bought one. Basically, they said, well, take the fuel filter, empty it into a beaker, put a magnet in it, see what happens. Put a magnet in it, of course, it comes back out looking like Sonic the Hedgehog. Yeah, that's not good. So then you have to make the choice. If you go, I had one of the injectors overhauled. I got it wrong. One of the injectors overhauled. I then could say, well, do I need to get all the others overhauled? Because it only had a fault code on one. One of them was basically stopping the others working. I then got to the realization that they all needed doing, and that starts to get more expensive. But then not just that, there was a chance that you could get them all done and get it running, and then the system could balk itself again because there's more fragments going around the system. And I rung diesel specialists up. I rang one in Fareham, and he said, what is it? I said, Mondeo. He said, yeah, what engine? I said, 2.2. You want TDCi? Yeah. ST? Yeah. He went, bin it. Get rid of it. Great. So the Picasso outlived that Mondeo, and we never actually got to use it. I drove it around the yard once. So, yeah. But I remember thinking it was a really comfy car. Really comfy, really nicely laid out. I quite like the styling on them, especially the Estates, you know. It would look good on the dyno, wouldn't it? Yeah, I realise that's about as much as I can add to the Mondeo mix. I mean, apart from like some of the best sounding Super Tourers ever were Mondeos. And I know a little bit about some Mondeo engines and things based on one of the cars I've got here for a customer, which there will be videos on soon. I think Griff probably would have liked those as well, so that's another thing to feel crap about. But what I could do is speak to a mate, Alex, who is my, I'd say compadre in the Overboard podcast, but that hasn't started yet. I mean, we've recorded them and I'm editing them, but they haven't gone out, so that doesn't mean anything to anyone. Good at this, aren't I? Why don't I ask Alex what he thinks of Mondeos, because he's got a better memory than me.
Recording in progress. Right, hello, Alex.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. And yourself?
I'm the same as I was just now before we started recording. So I've brought you on because if you'd like to show the people watching this video what you're wearing.
Yes, with pride. Hang on a sec, it gets better.
Oh wow, look at that.
Pride and
Wow.
place. This is a hoodie I used to wear when I used to work, unsurprisingly, on Performance Ford magazine, and this was kind of standard uniform for going to shows and things like that.
Yeah, well, this is I brought you in here because I figured like some people think like Andy Rouse, Pro Drive, Alan Menu, all these people renowned for like, you know, being in the public eye in Mondeo world. And I thought, no, let's speak to Alex, who used to work on Performance Ford about however many years ago.
Absolutely.
We're doing a quick video about Mondeos for a guy called Griff, who, as it turns out, isn't with us anymore. And I feel bad because he was a channel member, and I never did anything with Mondeos. So I thought I'm doing this video about Mondeos. I'm talking about the Mondeos I've had, of which there are 2.
Okay.
So I'm scraping the barrel. But then I thought, well, you used to work in Performance Ford. You must have some interesting Mondeo trivia and stories and stuff like that.
I don't know about interesting, but I can certainly. I mean, I've had.
Oh, that's fine. We'll go then. Don't worry about it.
I've had, I think 5 Mondeos in my time, and one of those was an ST24 that I ran as a project car on Performance Ford.
Is that silver one?
It was a silver one. That's right. Yeah. It didn't get that much done to it, but it did have suspension tweaks and new wheels and this, that, and the other. And I mean, I've always thought the Mondeo is probably one of the more underrated Fords, particularly, even just as a general car. When the Mark 1 came along, it completely changed how Fords were perceived. And a lot of people will remember the Mark 1 Focus as the car that did that. But actually, the Mondeo was there beforehand. It was the first car, really, I think, that benefited from, Richard Parry Jones's handling kind of tweaks, which were what turned Ford into what it's known as today, which is a car manufacturer known for building cars that are fun to drive. And the Mondeo,
what it was turned into today until they started making the stuff they're making now.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I mean, even now, kind of a modern Fiesta is still considered one of the most fun cars to drive in its class.
Yeah.
Humour's pretty good. So, it started a trend that you can follow a line through to today's cars. But yeah, I mean, Mark 1 Mondeo it was revolutionary. Up until that point, Ford had basically made cars from the pile and high and sell them cheap school of thought, which was effectively you build them down to a price, you sell them as for as low a price as you can, and the fleets will buy tons of them, and your sales figures are great, so on and so forth. Mondeo was really the start of them trying to build cars you'd actually want to drive and want to own, and it was hugely successful. It won all the group tests. They sold tons of the things, and it led to cars like the Puma and the Fiesta and the Focus, because it kind of proved that actually if you build a car that's desirable and people want to drive and own, then they will come, so to speak. And that kind of ethos and that thinking carried on right through the 90s and into the 2000s. So I've had a few. My first was actually a Mark 1 estate, completely boring 1.8 litre estate, but a hugely nostalgic car for me because it was bought as a road trip car. Me and a few college friends drove around Europe in it. It was just brilliant, comfortable, big, roomy. Slept in the back of it many times.
Good on the motorway, weren't they? Weren't they like sort of designed for the fleet man, weren't they? So they were sort of doing what the Cavalier and Vectra were good at, as in like just munching motorways. But the difference with the Mondeo is if you came off the motorway, it was still good.
That's exactly it. And that was the beauty of the Mondeo, was not only was it great, as you say, on the motorway, it was fun to drive off the motorway, but in addition, there were little things like the fact it was really comfortable, the ergonomics, the way all the interior was laid out, everything fell to hand really nicely. It was just a really nice place to be, and I think a lot of fleet drivers really valued that at the time. And the thing is, even if you aren't going to drive a car quickly, having a car that is responsive and the steering's direct and so on and so forth, it just gives you a confidence in the car and makes it much nicer to drive even at low speed. It's not all about throwing a car around. Having a car that handles is not all about having a car that's fun to throw around. It's also about a confidence in the car just at normal speeds as well. So that was kind of what the Mondeo gave that a lot of these kind of Repmobiles didn't at the time. You know, save something like a Peugeot 405 and maybe a Xantia as well. But I think the thing about the Mondeo is it didn't really kind of get going in terms of being a cult or desired car until kind of the STs came along, which probably was late into the Mark II's run. Really,
What were the fruity Mondeos to start with? The Mark One, there was
well, there wasn't really
SI, wasn't there?
You've got to remember that put it in context. The Mark One came along in the 90s during a time when insurance premiums were through the roof. So most manufacturers were staying away from making anything that was too hot or ostensibly overtly performance oriented. So there wasn't really a performance Mondeo. I mean, some would say maybe the 2-litre SI was a little bit sporty.
What was the sort of the yellow? I swear there was a yellow one that had like a funny body kit on it or something. You're right, laughing.
That was a dealer special actually. It was the Mondeo was originally available in a colour called Citrine Yellow, and it was actually Hendy's from down our way.
Yes, it was. My father-in-law told me about this one.
That's
yes,
right.
I remember.
They came up with the idea of I think they actually called it the Mondeo RS or something.
Yeah,
it wasn't official.
It looked bloody hideous, didn't it?
It was essentially a 2-litre SI. I think a 2-litre SI. Somebody's going to come in the comments and correct me, but I think it was a 2-litre SI it finished in Citrine Yellow, which was kind of the day glow yellow paint, with the RS accessories kit fitted and the RS accessory, because all Fords at the time you could buy a body kit for it from the accessories catalogue, and essentially what Hendy did was they bolted this body kit on, bolted the alloy wheels on. All of them were finished in Citrine Yellow, and they sold it as a dealer special run. And so that was really about as close as you got to having an overtly sporty Mark I Mondeo, but it wasn't really an official car. I mean, you could also buy a 2.5-litre V6, but again, it was only in the SI. I think it was in the SI, but it was definitely in the gear. And it wasn't really a sporty car. It was just a posh, fast, quickish Repmobile. But then essentially what happened was, with the Mark II, they took that same setup, the 2.5 V6, and bolted on again the RS accessories body kit and called it the ST24. And that was
kind of people use the term like iconic way too easily these days. But there was something about the ST24. It's like if you look at it in isolation, look at the individual bits of it.
Yeah.
And someone said, "Look, I'm going to show you the angles of this car." You think to yourself, "That's going to be really ugly." But then when you see it all together, it's like, I shouldn't like that, but I like that, and I don't know why. It's something about it, and like
they're handsome cars
seats and everything.
And the thing is, the ST24 is all but forgotten because the ST24 was, I think, 170-ish horsepower, so it was quick, but it wasn't earth-shattering, and lots of people.
First ST badged car, I think.
I think you're right, and actually, I believe at the time, retroactively, ST has been discussed as standing for sports technologies. But I seem to remember at the time it was called ST24 as a reference to Super Touring. And that then kind of got forgotten about, and everyone went, well, no, when Super Touring ended, it kind of got forgotten about, and everyone went, oh, no, it means sports technologies now, because they kept the badge and it just retroactively was changed. But I have a feeling the idea was to try and capitalise on the Super, because there was a Super Touring Edition Vectra at the time as well.
The ST,
and I have a feeling that was where the ST originally came from. But I can't verify that because I've never found any. I have a feeling I read it somewhere at the time, and I've always known that, but I've never found anything to kind of back that up. So I could be talking a complete load of rubbish. For everybody wanted a touring car derived Mondeo to be like the Sierra Cosworths, i.e., groundbreaking, earth-shattering performance for the time, a real sports car for the road, and what they really got was a 2.5 V6 gear with a body kit on it. So a lot of people,
they weren't rip snort as well. They were sort of. I mean, they sounded nice.
Look, I had one for a few years. It was a great car. I really like them. They handle well, they sound great, and they go well. And today you can buy them for absolute peanuts because nobody wants one.
I think they're just starting to go off. Because obviously I used to have the 200.
Yeah, you did. That's right. And that was really where the Mondeo, the fast Mondeo, started to become a lot more special, was the 200. I think. I think really the peak was the 220, though. I mean, the 220 was kind of
the 220. Yeah, that's the one Griff had.
That's right.
But he had the estate. Yeah, the Mark III, but it was an estate. It was.
That's right.
Because you could get an ST24 and an ST200 estate.
You could. That's right. Yeah.
And they carried it on with the ST220, and I think was that available as a hatch and a saloon?
It was a hatch. I think all three were available as a hatch, saloon, and estate, which was brilliant because it meant you could have a quick Mondeo that you could also carry the family around in, or the dogs or whatever.
Yeah.
And for my money, I think the estates generally the better looking ones of the three. With the
There's
body
something
business,
about them,
there's
isn't there?
something about
Certainly
the
with the
estate, isn't there?
yeah, certainly with the Mark III, with the 220.
Yeah, absolutely.
But of course, that had a 3-litre version of
That's
the
right.
V6,
Yeah,
didn't it?
exactly. That's
And
right.
I think they had fly-by-wire throttle as well. I may be making that up, but
Yeah,
back
you
in
might
my
be right.
days in the Ford parts thing, I seem to remember that there was differences with the 3-litre over the. It's the same basic engine, but there are a lot of differences. But I had, I know what you mean. I had an ST briefly. My other Mondeo was an ST TDCi, which was they made the diesel version, which they didn't do in the
That's
Mark
right.
1 and 2.
Correct.
But they did a diesel version in the Mark 3.
Yeah.
And I didn't really drive it because it was broken most of the time, as they tend to do.
Yeah.
Because it had a transit engine in it, believe it or not. It was the same engine they use in the transit. They called it the Puma engine, just to confuse everyone. But there was something about that. I think the Mark III. I mean, I don't know what the Mondeo enthusiasts think. I think the Mark III was better. I think the Mark III it might not have been as, I don't know, new at the time. In terms of like you say what the Mark 1 did, it brought Ford forward.
Yeah.
Mark 3 didn't. It just kind of brought them up to date.
Yeah.
But there was something about that car, like just everything, like the driving position, like everything in it.
Yeah.
It just felt like this. Like I can't think. It's not a disparaging way. It just felt this is fine.
Yeah.
Like everything in this, there's nothing bad here. Everything's good. Like the layout, the design, the comfort, the space.
I think what you had with the Mark III was you had everything that had made the Mark 1 and 2 good, but with better build quality and better solidity. The big problem with the Mark III, of course, was that most of them were 2-litre diesels, and it's since been kind of found that the 2-litre diesel wasn't that good an engine because it had all sorts of fuel.
Mine had the ST had the 2.2, which was the same version of it. But yeah, they had the Delphi injection system, and basically bits of the fuel pump go round and block everything up, and break up and kill the injectors and things.
If we leave that
to one in actual fact, the 220 is probably the sensible one of the two.
Well, yeah, exactly.
It's much more reliable.
You're right. It's the more reliable one of the two. They're pretty. I mean, there are a few things that can go wrong with them, but they're pretty bulletproof. Those old Duratec V6s. And I think they're going to be a car that will one day be worth, I wouldn't say huge amounts, but it'll be worth something, because there is a sort of a cult. They do have a little place in the cult narrative, because they're the car that Clarkson went on Top Gear and said this is rarer than an Aston Martin, and everybody kind of remembers that moment when he went on Top Gear and said, here's a Mondeo that's rarer than an Aston Martin, because they were quite rare at the time. And
they also said, if I remember rightly, on Top Gear, or Grand Tour or whatever it was, it was the only car, one of the only cars where all three of them agreed it was good.
That's absolutely right. Yeah,
which doesn't really happen very often.
Yeah, and the thing was, they weren't wrong. It was brilliant. What's not to like? It's a 3-litre V6. It makes a great noise, 220-ish horsepower, hence the name. Again, it wasn't a Cosworth, and I think again that's why a lot of people are a bit disappointed by it. But I think if you didn't have cars like the Cosworth and the RS Turbo, which were so legendary at the time, the Mondeo would have been seen in people would have been so excited about it. Can you imagine his boring old Ford, and they've made a family Mondeo with a 220 V6 in it. That's great. It's brilliant. So I think
true. And the ironic thing is, I think for my money, the Mondeo is among its kind of peers or rivals or whatever, is probably a better car than most of them.
Yeah.
Whereas if you went back into the hot hatch days and looked at like the RS Turbo or the XR2 or 3 or whatever, and they're like, no one ever thinks of those as any of the best. They were just kind of like, they were popular, but they weren't great. Whereas the Mondeo genuinely was really good. It was a really good car.
And we can tie that up neatly in a little bundle by saying, because of course that was before the Mark 1 Mondeo came along. It was before Ford's commitment to handling. It was before Ford realised that actually, it's better if we make cars people want to buy rather than have to buy because they're cheap. And that really.
How many? Was there 5 Mondeos?
Hang on, no. Hang on. Yes, there were 5. Yeah.
Yeah, 5. Because I don't know anything about the 5th one.
So the fifth one is by the time of the fifth one, they were sort of falling behind. I mean, interest in that segment of cars, the D segment cars, was falling off anyway.
Yeah, it wasn't just the Mondeo; it was everything that size,
Yeah,
wasn't it? It wasn't the
exactly.
premium brand.
The Mondeo, that generation Mondeo was always a bit of a disappointment because it was effectively a rebadged version of the American Ford Fusion, I think. And it took a little while to arrive here. Interior quality wasn't as that great compared with rivals at the time. I've driven a couple. I don't think they're bad cars, and actually on the used market now, they're pretty good value for what they are.
Mm.
But there was never a halo model. They were never kind of seen with the same
I
sort
was
of
just about to say,
previous
there's no. I
versions.
mean, there's no Halo model there, but there was kind-ish with the Mark IV,
There was,
because you could get the Mark IV with the
the
2.5
two and a
turbo
half.
engine, the
That's
Volvo.
right, and it was never kind of an ST model, but a
No,
Mark IV with the 2.5 turbo, or latterly as it turned into, toward the end of its life, they swapped it out for a 2-litre turbo
oh,
EcoBoost.
the Eco Boost or Eco Boost was that was the first car that used Eco Boost as a name.
Was
I
it?
know, was it Eco Boost? Am I
I
talking shite?
I think the Fiesta was the first car that used EcoBoost as a name, but I could be wrong. I'd have to look that up. But
I
anyway,
know.
yeah. So the 2.5 was the more characterful engine because it was the 5 pot,
Mm.
and 5 pots just make a nicer noise. But the
Yeah,
2-litre EcoBoost was the same engine as the Focus ST of the time, the Mark
yeah,
III Focus
Mark
ST got the 2.
Three. Yeah.
And I
Do you
think,
know what I discovered the other day,
mm,
from a channel member actually,
mm.
in the comments? Well, I did a video with the S Max on the dyno,
Oh yeah,
and he wrote in the comments that I think he's in Australia or New Zealand.
mm,
The Mondeo Mark IV over there with the
mm.
5-cylinder engine. There was a Halo model. Do you know what it was called?
XR.
XR5. And
Yes,
I'm just like, yes,
great.
yes.
Should have done that in the
Why did they
UK.
not do that here?
I know. Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Because I think the ST was called the XR5 or something over there as well, wasn't it? The ST wasn't the ST on ours. It was something different. But
What the earliest?
the Mark
The
II,
early Mondeo?
the Mark II Focus ST was called
Oh
XR5,
right,
I think, in Australia as well.
yeah, no, yeah,
So
possibly.
it wouldn't surprise me if the Mondeo was they just applied the same branding to the Mondeo, which would have made perfect sense. I don't know why they didn't do the same here.
They
But
should have called it
I
the
think
XR5 Ti.
really,
That's what they should have. That's what they should have called
the
it,
XR5 Ti, yeah, I like
and
that.
put
Yeah.
like an orange sticker on the side, in the window.
Nice, yeah. But no, look, I think Mondeos are due their time in the sun. And I think whether you're talking about early ones as becoming, potential modern classics, or kind of the STs as being performance cars that were kind of underrated in their time. I've always been a bit of a Mondeo fan. I've had several of them, as you know, and I come back to them because they do what they do incredibly well. They're comfy, they're
Yeah,
dependable, they're roomy, and there's something about them that's incredibly reassuring. Whether it's the way the interior layout's so well thought through, whether it's to do with just the blend of ride and handling that's so well
yeah.
executed. There's something about them that's just really nice. So yeah, I'm a huge Mondeo fan, and I can understand why somebody would enjoy having an ST like that because it's on my list of cars I'd like to have one day. I still think
What, the
they're
220?
the 220. I think they're just
Mm.
fabulous looking cars.
They
Um,
do look right, don't they?
they do, especially my particular favourite is they did quite a rare colour now. It's called ink blue. It's like a darker version of the performance blue that everyone knows and loves.
Mm.
That on a saloon ST220 looks superb. And the other one I like is when you get a metallic grey with a red leather interior. I mean, look, this was Ford trying to be a BMW 3 Series rival, and by
Yeah,
and large, the quality wasn't quite there to do it properly. But you could go out and buy an ST220 and have as much fun as the driver of a BMW 330 at the time, and you could do it on
yeah.
less money. And I think for my money, probably looked a bit better as well.
And that's where the call ended, because it turns out that Zoom, if you don't pay for it and you're on the free package, there is a limit on how long you can run the call for while you're recording it. That's useful. Yeah, so that's where we are. I don't know how to end the video. I don't know how to end the video at all. I'm kind of stuck. What I thought I would do is show you what kind of guy he was, Griff, I haven't gone through any of these comments yet, but I know that I can say, I know 100% with complete certainty that I can say to you, I'm going to put some of the comments that he left on some of the videos over the years on the screen. None of them are going to be negative. And I'm not saying like, oh, he's a fluffer and he's just like, oh, just be kind, just say nice stuff. No, it's not that. The comments are always warm, funny, positive. It's just, you know, it's not like being a fluffer. It's just a mark of what the guy was like. And I'm gutted I never met him. You know, I can put these things on the screen now and it'll be obvious what kind of guy the guy was. And as well as some of the pictures that people have of his car. His car was seen at Rustival 2 and Rustival 1, and it was due to go to Rustival 3 with a couple of other Mondeos. But obviously, well, you can't go to Rustival 3 anymore, but they are going to hold a space for him, I believe. There's going to be an empty bay where he would have been. Unless someone could bring his car down. I don't know I don't know the situation, but you know, maybe someone will bring his car down. If not, he will be one way or the other. There's either going to be his car or there's going to be a space where his car should be. You know, either way, he's not forgotten. Yeah, sorry, I tried to do a video. I don't, you know, what'd you do? Yeah, Mondeo video for Griff.